My name is Eleanor. I am 69 years old. Most people believe that when a woman reaches my age, her biggest dreams are already behind her. They think she should slow down, sit quietly by the window, watch the seasons change, and wait for life to become smaller. I believe that too. Until one ordinary Tuesday morning, when my 12-year-old granddaughter looked into my tired eyes, held my wrinkled hand, and quietly said something that changed my life forever. "Grandma, I don't think your best chapter has even started." I smiled because I thought she was only trying to make me feel better. I had no idea that one sentence would lead us to open the tiniest bakery in our little American town and somehow bring back a family that had slowly drifted apart over many years. But before I tell you how that happened, you need to know who I was before the bakery, before the laughter returned, before our kitchen smelled like fresh cinnamon bread every morning, before strangers began standing in long lines just to taste recipes that had lived inside my family for generations. You see, I wasn't always lonely. There was a time when my home was full. Every Sunday, the dining table was covered with homemade pies, warm bread, roasted chicken, fresh cookies, and the loud sound of people talking over one another. My husband, Thomas, always carved the turkey. My children argued over who made the better mashed potatoes. The grandchildren ran through the hallway, laughing so loudly that I used to pretend to complain, even though I secretly loved every second of it. Back then, our house wasn't just a house, it was home. The kind of home people never wanted to leave. Every birthday, every holiday, every celebration happened in my kitchen. People often told me, "Eleanor, you don't just cook food, you make people feel loved." I never understood what they meant. To me, cooking wasn't special. It was simply another way of saying, "I love you." Years quietly passed. The grandchildren grew older. College came. Jobs came. Busy schedules arrived. Sunday dinners slowly disappeared. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became fewer. The chairs around my dining table, one by one, stayed empty. At first, I told myself that everyone was just busy. Then weeks became months. Months became years. The kitchen that had once echoed with laughter now echoed with silence. Some mornings, I baked an apple pie out of habit, then realized there was no one coming to eat it. I would wrap slices carefully and give them to neighbors. Not because I didn't enjoy baking anymore, but because I couldn't bear seeing a full pie sitting untouched on the counter. Every evening, I made 1 cup of tea instead of 6, 1 small plate instead of a table full of food. I smiled whenever my family called. But after hanging up, the house felt even quieter than before. Loneliness is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes little by little. 1 empty chair, 1 missed birthday, 1 canceled visit, 1 silent Sunday at a time. Eventually, you stop expecting anyone to knock on the door. I convinced myself this is simply what getting old looks like. Then, everything changed. One rainy afternoon, my granddaughter Lily walked through my front door, carrying nothing more than a backpack, a notebook, and the brightest smile I had seen in years. She hugged me tighter than usual, looked around my quiet kitchen, noticed the cooling apple pie sitting untouched on the table. Then she asked the question no one had asked me in years. "Grandma, will you teach me how to bake?" At that moment, I thought I was only about to teach a little girl how to make bread. I had absolutely no idea. That one simple question would soon bring an entire family back to the same table. One loaf, one cookie, and one heart at a time. The morning after Lily asked me to teach her, she arrived at my house before the sun had fully risen. She carried a notebook, a pencil, and a tiny pink apron that looked much too big for her. She smiled the moment she saw me. "Good morning, Grandma." I couldn't help smiling back. "You really came?" She laughed. "I told you I would." That morning, for the first time in years, my kitchen wasn't quiet anymore. I handed Lily an old wooden mixing bowl, the same bowl my own mother had used nearly 50 years ago. The edges were worn. Tiny scratches covered the surface. But to me, it was priceless. "This bowl," I whispered, "has fed 4 generations." Lily gently touched it, as if she were holding treasure. "I promise I'll take care of it." Those words warmed my heart. We started with something simple: cinnamon bread. The recipe had never been written down. It lived only in my memory. My grandmother taught my mother taught me, and now it was my turn to pass it on. Lily carefully measured the flour. She accidentally spilled some across the counter. Her eyes grew wide. "Oh no, I ruined everything." I softly laughed. "No, sweetheart. The best kitchens are always a little messy." She smiled again. Together, we mixed butter, sugar, fresh eggs, warm milk. The sweet smell of cinnamon slowly filled the room. For the first time in a very long time, my kitchen felt alive again. As the dough rested, Lily asked quietly, "Grandma, were you always this good at baking?" I smiled. "Oh goodness, no. The first pie I ever baked, I burned so badly. Your great-grandfather politely ate 2 slices anyway." Lily burst into laughter. "You must be kidding." "I'm not. He said, 'Burnt pie made with love still tastes better than perfect pie made without it.'" Lily quickly wrote those words into her notebook. She looked up. "I'm writing down everything you say. So one day, I can teach my grandchildren too." I looked away for a moment, because tears had already begun filling my eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of gratitude. For years, I believed my family's traditions would disappear with me. But now, a 12-year-old girl was making sure they would live on as the bread baked. The smell drifted outside. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Parker, knocked gently on the door. "I hope I'm not interrupting. But whatever you're baking, it smells amazing." Lily looked at me with excitement. "Can she try some?" I smiled. "Of course." We sliced the warm loaf. Steam rose into the air. Mrs. Parker closed her eyes after the first bite. "Oh my, I haven't tasted bread like this since I was a little girl." She looked directly at me. "Eleanor, you should sell this." I laughed. "At my age?" She nodded without hesitation. "Why not?" Before I could answer, Lily grabbed my hands. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Grandma, what if we opened a tiny bakery? Just the 2 of us." I chuckled. "My dear, I'm 69. I don't know the first thing about running a business." Lily smiled with complete confidence. "Maybe not, but you know everything about making people feel loved." Her words stayed in my heart all night. Long after she had gone home, I sat alone in my quiet kitchen, looking at my old recipe box, looking at the empty chairs around the table. Then I whispered to myself, what if she's right? I had no idea. That one little question would soon become the beginning of the greatest adventure our family had ever shared. For nearly 2 weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about Lily's idea. The bakery, at 69, every time I looked at my old recipe box, I heard her little voice again. "Grandma, you already know how to make people happy." One afternoon, Lily came rushing into my kitchen carrying her laptop. "Grandma, I found a tiny shop for rent." I laughed. "You've already been looking?" She grinned. "I've been looking since the day Mrs. Parker tasted your bread." She showed me the pictures. The building was small, very small. An old flower shop that had closed months earlier. The paint was peeling, the windows were dusty. The wooden sign above the door was broken. Most people would have seen an old forgotten store. Lily smiled. "I see our dream." I looked at the pictures for a long time, then quietly asked, "What if nobody comes?" She gently squeezed my hand. "Then we'll still have each other." That simple answer was all the courage I needed. The next morning, we signed the lease. When I held the tiny silver key in my hand, my heart was beating like a young woman's again. I whispered, "Thomas, I hope you'd be proud of me." For the next 3 weeks, every member of our family slowly became part of the dream. My son painted the walls a warm cream color. My daughter hung beautiful flower baskets outside the windows. My grandson built wooden shelves by hand. Even my daughter-in-law, who had been so busy for years, spent an entire weekend sewing soft blue curtains for the bakery. I stood quietly in the corner, watching everyone work together for the first time in years. Nobody was rushing home. Nobody was checking the time. Nobody was looking at their phones. They were laughing, talking, helping one another. The bakery wasn't even open yet, but somehow it had already started bringing us back together. One evening, Lily walked over carrying a small wooden board. "What do you think?" Painted in beautiful white letters were the words, "Eleanor's Little Bakery" underneath, in smaller letters, "Made with love." Since always, the moment I saw it, my eyes filled with tears. I've never owned anything with my name on it. Lily hugged me tightly. "You've earned it." The night before opening, neither of us could sleep. We baked until nearly midnight. Fresh cinnamon bread, apple pies, chocolate cookies, blueberry muffins, lemon cake. The sweet smell filled every corner of the bakery. As I placed the last loaf onto the cooling rack, I quietly whispered, "What if tomorrow nobody walks through that door?" Lily smiled without looking up. She was carefully tying ribbons around little cookie bags. "Grandma, you've spent your whole life opening your heart to people. Tomorrow, we're simply opening a different door." The next morning, I unlocked the bakery for the very first time. The little bell above the entrance rang softly. I took a deep breath. The shelves were full. The coffee was hot. Everything was ready. But outside, the sidewalk was completely empty. I looked at Lily. She smiled, trying to hide her own nervousness. We waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Still, no customers. My heart slowly began to sink. Maybe I really was too old. Maybe everyone else had been right. Maybe dreams had an age limit after all. Just as I reached for the closed sign, someone gently opened the bakery door, then another and another. Within minutes, people were filling every corner of our tiny bakery. But the first customer was someone I never expected to see. The moment I recognized their face, I completely froze. The first customer. I stood completely still. The woman slowly walking toward the bakery counter looked strangely familiar. She smiled warmly. Then I recognized her. It was my old high school teacher, Mrs. Margaret Wilson. She was now 87 years old. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. She leaned gently on a wooden cane, but her smile hadn't changed at all. Eleanor, I heard a rumor that my favorite student had opened a bakery. I laughed through happy tears. You remembered me? She smiled. How could I ever forget the little girl who always brought homemade cookies to school? Before I could answer, she reached into her purse, pulled out a faded photograph, and placed it on the counter. It was a picture of my 15-year-old self, standing beside her, holding a blue ribbon from the county baking competition. I gently covered my mouth. I haven't seen this picture in over 50 years. Mrs. Wilson softly replied, I kept it because I knew one day you would do something beautiful with your gift. My eyes filled with tears. For years, I believed everyone had forgotten me, but someone had quietly believed in me all along. She pointed toward the cinnamon bread. I'll take 1 loaf. And 2 apple pies. Lily carefully wrapped everything. Mrs. Wilson smiled at her. You must be the granddaughter. Lily nodded proudly. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Wilson looked at both of us. You know, this bakery isn't selling bread. It's serving memories. Those words spread through the little shop. Soon another customer entered, and then another. An elderly couple bought blueberry muffins. A young father purchased cookies for his children. A nurse on her lunch break grabbed fresh bread. By noon, almost every shelf was empty. Lily stared in disbelief. Grandma, we sold out. We both laughed. Neither of us could believe it. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Customers didn't leave after buying food. They stayed. They sat together, shared coffee, talked with strangers, laughed together. One woman quietly told me, my mother passed her recipes down to me, but I never took time to learn them. I wish I had. I gently held her hand. It's never too late. Start this weekend. Another young man smiled. My grandmother still bakes every Sunday. I think I'll surprise her. One conversation turned into another. Soon, our tiny bakery wasn't just a bakery. It became a place where people slowed down, where grandparents and grandchildren sat together, where neighbors became friends, where families remembered what really mattered. Late that evening, after we locked the front door, Lily counted the money, then looked at me with shining eyes. We actually made a profit. I smiled. The money is wonderful. But today, I earned something much more valuable. She looked curious. What? I slowly looked around the little bakery, the warm lights, the empty trays, the chairs where families had laughed together. Then I quietly answered, purpose. For the first time in many years, I woke up excited for tomorrow. Every morning became another chance to bake, to smile, to hug people, to remind someone that they mattered. Weeks passed. The bakery became the heart of our little town. But one afternoon, a television producer walked through our front door. She looked around quietly, then asked one simple question. Mrs. Eleanor, would you be willing to share your story with all of America? At that moment, I had no idea. Our tiny bakery was about to become something far bigger than either Lily or I had ever imagined. The greatest reward I never imagined, that one tiny bakery on one quiet little street could touch so many hearts. A month after the television interview aired, people began traveling from different cities. Some drove 2 hours. Some came from neighboring states, not because we had the best bakery, but because they wanted to experience what family felt like again. Every morning, Before opening the front door, Lily and I stood together, held hands, and said the same words. Today, let's make someone feel loved. Those words became the heart of our bakery. One chilly Saturday morning, a young mother walked in with her little daughter. The little girl couldn't have been older than 7. She stared at the display of fresh cinnamon rolls. Her eyes sparkled. The mother quietly whispered, "I'm sorry. We can only afford one." Before I could answer, Lily gently placed a second cinnamon roll into the box. The mother quickly shook her head. "No, we didn't pay for that." Lily smiled. "I know. My grandma taught me that kindness is always fresh, and it never runs out." The young mother's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Lily tightly. That moment, I realized something beautiful. I wasn't just passing down recipes anymore. I was passing down values, compassion, generosity, love. Weeks turned into months. Our little bakery became more than a business. Every Friday afternoon, grandparents brought their grandchildren to bake cookies. Saturday mornings became family baking day. Children covered in flour laughed beside their grandparents. Parents sat together over warm coffee. Neighbors who had never spoken before became friends. Even birthdays, anniversaries, and family reunions started happening inside our little bakery. One afternoon, I noticed something that made me stop working. My son, who had always been too busy, was laughing with his sister while decorating cupcakes. My son-in-law was teaching the grandchildren how to knead bread dough. The cousins, who barely knew one another a year ago, were playing together behind the bakery. For the first time in years, our family wasn't meeting because they had to. They were together because they wanted to be. I quietly wiped away a tear. Lily noticed. She wrapped her arm around mine. "Grandma, remember when you thought everyone had forgotten Sunday dinners?" I nodded. She smiled. "Now they're making new memories." She was right. Our family no longer needed a holiday or a special occasion. Love had become our tradition again. Then, exactly 1 year after opening the bakery, the mayor invited us to the town's annual community celebration. I thought we were simply attending as guests, but when we arrived, I saw a small stage decorated with flowers. Hundreds of people filled the town square. Families, children, grandparents, neighbors. Everyone was smiling. The mayor stepped onto the stage. He looked toward me, then said, "Today, we are honoring a woman who reminded this town that success isn't measured by money. It's measured by the number of hearts you bring together." He smiled warmly. "Eleanor, would you please join us?" I slowly walked onto the stage, still wondering why everyone was applauding. Then the mayor uncovered a beautiful wooden sign. It read, "Eleanor's Family Bakery, where every recipe begins with love, and every customer leaves his family." At that moment, the entire crowd stood to their feet, a standing ovation. I looked toward Lily. She was crying. I was crying too. I hugged her as tightly as I could. "My sweet girl, I thought I was teaching you how to bake." She smiled through her tears. "And you did." I gently shook my head. "No, you taught me that it's never too late to begin again, never too late to dream again, and never too late to bring a family back together, one loaf of bread, one warm hug, and one act of love at a time." As the sun slowly set behind our little town, I looked at my family, laughing together outside the bakery. Then I whispered to myself, "My best chapter didn't end at 69. It had only just begun. Life after that day was never the same. Every morning, as I unlocked the bakery door, I no longer saw an old woman. I saw someone who still had purpose, someone who still had dreams, and most importantly, someone who still had love to give. Our tiny bakery became a tradition every Saturday. Families lined up before sunrise, not because they were hungry, but because they wanted to spend time together. Some grandparents brought their grandchildren to learn baking. Some parents came simply to sit together without their phones. Others came because, for one peaceful hour, they felt like home again. One afternoon, a little boy walked up to me. He couldn't have been older than 9. He handed me a folded piece of paper. "I made this for you." I opened it slowly. It was a drawing, a little bakery, flowers in front, a smiling grandmother, a young girl beside her, above the picture. He had written in crooked handwriting, "Thank you for helping my family smile again." I couldn't stop my tears. That little drawing was worth more than any amount of money. I carefully placed it inside a frame. Today, it still hangs on the bakery wall. Months later, Lily graduated from middle school. The school asked each student to give a short speech about someone who changed their life. Parents filled the auditorium. Teachers smiled proudly. I quietly sat in the last row, not wanting anyone to notice me. Then Lily walked onto the stage. She looked around the room. Finally, her eyes found mine. She smiled, then began speaking. "Everyone thinks my grandma taught me how to bake." She paused. "But that's only a small part of the story." She taught me that love isn't something you say. It's something you do. Every loaf of bread, every cookie, every pie was really her way of saying, "You matter. You belong. You are loved." I felt tears running down my face. The entire auditorium became silent. Lily continued, "When I grow up, I don't want to be remembered for having the biggest house, the most money, or the most successful career. I want people to feel the same way my grandma makes people feel, loved." The audience stood and applauded, but I couldn't move. I simply cried, not because I was proud of the bakery, but because I knew the greatest recipe I had ever shared wasn't written on paper. It had been written inside my granddaughter's heart. That evening, we closed the bakery early. Lily and I sat on the wooden bench outside. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. The flower baskets gently moved in the evening breeze. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Grandma, do you know why I asked you to teach me baking?" I smiled. "I've wondered about that for a long time." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "When I was little, I noticed something. No matter how difficult life became, no matter how stressed people were, they always smiled when they walked into your kitchen. I wanted the whole world to know how that felt." I wrapped my arm around her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. The bakery lights glowed softly behind us. Families walked home carrying warm bread. Children laughed. Grandparents held tiny hands. And in that quiet moment, I finally understood. A bakery was never our dream. Love was. The bakery was simply the place where love found a home. Today, I am 69 years old. People still ask me, "What is your secret ingredient?" I always smile, point toward Lily, and answer, "It isn't butter. It isn't flour. It isn't sugar. The secret ingredient is making every person who walks through that door feel like family, because recipes can be copied, bread can be baked anywhere. But love, shared from one generation to the next, becomes a legacy, and if one little bakery can bring one family back together, then maybe, just maybe, there's still enough kindness to bring the whole world a little closer. One warm loaf, one gentle hug, and one loving heart at a time. The end. 5 years passed, but somehow our little bakery still smelled exactly the same. Fresh cinnamon, warm bread, apple pie cooling on the windowsill, and love baked into every single recipe. By then, people no longer called it simply a bakery. Around town, everyone knew it as the heart of Main Street. Every Saturday morning, families arrived before sunrise. Grandparents held tiny hands. Children carried little aprons. Parents laughed over hot coffee. Strangers became friends. And every person who walked through our little wooden door left smiling. One quiet afternoon, Lily walked toward me carrying an old wooden box, the same recipe box that had been sitting inside my kitchen cabinet for decades. She carefully placed it on the table. "Grandma, I have one last surprise," I smiled. "My sweet girl, you've already given me more surprises than one lifetime deserves." She gently opened the box. Inside were hundreds of handwritten recipe cards, but something was different. Each recipe now had a family photo beside it. Apple pie, a picture of 4 generations laughing together, chocolate cookies, children covered in flour, cinnamon bread, grandparents teaching tiny hands how to knead dough. Every recipe now carried a memory. Lily softly said, "I realized something. People don't remember recipes. They remember who they made them with." At that moment, I couldn't hold back my tears. She wasn't preserving food. She was preserving family. A few weeks later, the town library invited us to host the very first family recipe day. Families brought recipes that had been passed down for generations. Some arrived with recipe cards over 100 years old. Others came with only memories. One elderly man quietly admitted, "I never learned my mother's pie recipe. I thought she'd always be here." The room became silent. Then Lily smiled warmly. "It's never too late to start a new tradition." By the end of the afternoon, children were writing recipes beside their grandparents. Parents were taking family photos. Everyone was laughing. Everyone was talking. Everyone was present. As I looked around the room, my heart whispered something beautiful. This wasn't about baking anymore. It never had been. It was about making sure love never disappeared from another family. That evening, as the bakery closed, Lily and I sat outside on the old wooden bench. The sun painted the sky with soft shades of gold and pink. Flower baskets gently swayed in the breeze. She rested her head on my shoulder, just like she had when she was 12. "Grandma, you know what my favorite recipe is?" I smiled. "The cinnamon bread?" She laughed. "No." "The apple pie?" She shook her head again. "My favorite recipe is every Saturday I spent with you." A single tear rolled down my cheek because I finally understood. Children don't remember expensive gifts. They remember time. They remember laughter. They remember feeling safe. They remember being loved. I gently held Lily's hand. "My darling, one day, this bakery may close. The wooden shelves may grow old. The ovens may stop baking. But if you keep loving people, this place will never disappear." She squeezed my hand. "I promise." Years later, families still tell the story of a tiny bakery opened by a 69-year-old grandmother and her 12-year-old granddaughter. They don't remember how many pies we sold. They don't remember how much money we earned. They remember something much more important. They remember walking into a place where someone looked them in the eyes, smiled sincerely, and made them feel like family. Today, when people ask me, "What was the greatest thing you ever baked?" I always smile. And then I quietly answer, "It wasn't bread. It wasn't cookies. It wasn't pie. The greatest thing I ever made was a place where love was always waiting." And if this story teaches us anything, it's this: you are never too old to begin again, never too old to chase a dream, and never too old to bring a family closer. One warm loaf, one gentle hug, and one act of love at a time, because in the end, the sweetest recipe isn't written in a cookbook. It's written in the hearts of the people who will always remember how you made them feel. The end. 10 years passed. The little bakery on Main Street was still standing. The white wooden sign had faded a little. The flower baskets were replaced every spring. The bell above the front door still rang, with the same soft sound that always made me smile. I was now 79 years old. My hands had become slower. My steps were smaller. But every morning, before the sun rose, I unlocked the bakery door. Not because I had to, because it still felt like home. Lily was 22 now, no longer the little girl who spilled flour across my kitchen counter. She had become a confident young woman. People often asked, "Who owns this bakery now?" Lily always smiled. "We both do. But the heart of this bakery will always belong to my grandma." One Saturday morning, I noticed something beautiful. A little girl, about 7 years old, walked into the bakery holding her grandmother's hand. She looked around with wide eyes, exactly the way Lily once had. She quietly asked, "Grandma, can you teach me to bake?" Her grandmother smiled. "I don't know how anymore." Before I could say anything, Lily walked over. She knelt beside the little girl. "What would you like to learn?" The little girl smiled. "Everything." Lily looked toward me. Our eyes met. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. I knew. The tradition had found another generation. That afternoon, the bakery was filled with laughter again. Tiny hands covered in flour, grandparents sharing stories, parents taking photographs, children proudly carrying warm cookies. I sat quietly in my favorite chair, watching it all. My heart felt full. Years ago, I believed I was opening a bakery. Now I understood. We had opened something much bigger. We had created a place where generations could meet, where childhood memories were born, where love became a family tradition. As the evening sun poured through the bakery windows, Lily brought me a fresh cinnamon roll. Still warm, just the way I used to make them. She smiled. "Grandma, taste it." I took one bite, closed my eyes, and laughed. "It's perfect." She grinned. "I used your recipe." I gently shook my head. "No, you used your heart." She hugged me tightly. "I only learned from the best teacher." I smiled through happy tears. The greatest gift a teacher can receive is seeing the student become even better. Outside, families laughed together. Children chased one another down the sidewalk. The flower boxes swayed gently in the breeze. The bakery windows glowed with warm light. For a long moment, I simply watched. Then I whispered, "My dream was never to build the biggest bakery. It was to build a place where no one ever felt alone. And somehow, with one little girl, one tiny bakery, and countless acts of love, that dream came true. Because buildings grow old, recipes can fade, but when love is passed from one generation to the next, it becomes something no time can ever erase. That will always be the sweetest recipe of all.